This is my ultimate DM screen for running games of Dungeons & Dragons. Okay, it's not finished yet, but that is the plan. To use my experience from the last 5 years of running D&D to fill this with everything I actually need to run better games, leaving out all of the stuff that I never used on my old DM screens. So today I'm starting that journey of showing you how I'm going to turn this blank canvas into the best damn DM screen I can, and how that is going to include an entire filming setup mounted right here that is going to let me and my friends record our games at this table. I'm Jacob from Painted for Combat, and let's dive right into it. But before we could talk about everything I have planned for this DM screen, we first need to talk about what's already been done. The foundation of this screen is a set of 3D printed brackets and trims, which will all be screwed into place, holding together 3 panels. A long central panel and 2 small angled side pieces that keep the screen stable, all of which have been cut from the top of an old desk. Hence the trim also needing to run along the bottom of the screen because my job here was a little rough. But these aren't quite ready to be put together yet, as I don't really want my players having to look at an old piece of paint-covered chipboard. So we'll go ahead and unscrew all of these panels so we can freshen them up a bit first. After giving all these pieces a good sand to knock off any high spots, we're going to go ahead and apply some adhesive vinyl sheets to give this more of a dark wood look, to nicely fit in with the shelves we've added to the space, which you'll probably have noticed have magically appeared in the background. This stuff can be a little difficult to cleanly apply to large areas, so I'm going to focus on getting this as clean as possible at the start and the end of the panel. Then I can do any course correction or straightening in the middle of the board, since that will later be covered up by the aforementioned filming setup once we get to it. With this applied, we can get the angled brackets screwed back into place and rinse and repeat with the sides. For the back of the screen, I'm happy to leave this black, though I will make the effort to use some milliput to fill in the holes where the old desk hardware was, and I'll be sure to hit this with some black paint later to cover it up. The final finishing touch for this stage of the build is gluing on some black trim to the underside of the middle panel, being sure to leave a gap for the mounting point of our filming setup later. Now, let's move on to the plan for the rest of the build. This screen is not just for information and rules references. It's also going to house a bunch of physical, tactile elements that I want on hand for running my games. The central panel is going to have a clear area for me to put my laptop, which isn't actually going to leave me with all that much room for traditional DM screen information. To combat this, I want to magnetize this entire middle section. This way I can make a bunch of info and rules cards that I can easily swap out depending on what I think will happen in any given session. A set for combat, or wilderness exploration, or moving through an urban environment, dungeon delving, and so on. A bunch of different cards that I can easily swap out on the fly. This will also have the added benefit that I'll be able to use these magnetized areas for my creature cards, to be able to track initiative on top of the DM screen so that both me and my players can see it. On the left-hand side of the screen, we're going to be putting something that I have always wanted on a DM screen. A dedicated hanger for condition rings. These are super useful prints that you can hang on minis to mark what conditions they are affected by in combat. And above those, I've left a space to actually be able to put a card with a quick reference for what each of the conditions do. Moving over to the right-hand side of the board, in a similar vein, I think we'll go ahead and add a small set of shelves here, to be able to store minis, spell effects, and small pieces of terrain. And these drawers are only going to need to be so tall, so above them we'll leave a little bit of extra space, probably for some more condition ring hangers for other things that come up commonly during any given campaign. And then the back of the central panel is going to be the mounting point for our filming setup, which we'll get to a bit later. And to really finish everything off, I'll also be making a phone holder, dice tray, and dice stand all in one that we'll build at the end. Making a start on the magnet rails, I originally wanted to go with some thin lengths of stainless steel, similar to a metal ruler. However, I was unable to find what I needed locally, so went for some cheap magnetic rolls. These won't have a super great hold, but should still be more than enough to hold up some paper. I decided on 2 levels here, one at the top for smaller notes and tracking initiative, and one a little above halfway down for my larger pages and rules. Following this, I printed off some super simple magnet pin heads, which I designed to hold either a 6x3 or 2 5x2mm magnets, each of which should give enough hold for what I need. Now, I don't want to bog this video down with all of the little details of every rule and mechanic I chose to put up on my screen. And frankly, I'm sure that I'm going to find a ton of things to add to these DM screen info cards as I use the new screen, especially now that my group are starting our first campaign with 5.5e rules. But for the time being, here's a brief summary of what I chose to prioritize. A table for ability scores, as well as abilities and associated skills, plus some common calculations, such as attack bonuses and spell saves. On my city card, lifestyle, services, food and lodging are all commonly used references, and a card for travel basics and tracking, followed by a combat-oriented card for damage, exhaustion, and object interactions. And this is likely a very small start to what will be a growing collection of different info cards, things that I'll be able to print to put on this screen once I better know what rules I keep needing to reference in 5.5e. Next up, the condition ring hanger. The rings themselves have been available for forever as part of my Patreon STL welcome bundle, but when it came time to make a hanger, this had to be made from scratch. So I designed it to print easily without supports and made it so that each peg should be able to hold about 8 or so of each condition ring. I've gone for 12 hangers here because I think that's how many of the core conditions are going to come up enough in combat to warrant having rings for them, and above them I've made sure to leave a gap for a printout with all of the conditions summarized. And once printed, this was screwed in as well, and finally stocked up with some condition hangers, color-coded and printed up on the U1. Admittedly, I do wish that I made these pegs slightly angled rather than perfectly straight, because the rings have a tendency to try and jump off, but this is going to work just fine, and I can update those files later. And while we're on the topic of files, all of the STLs you're seeing me print here today will be available to download. All of the original files that I've designed for the screen will be added to the STL welcome bundle for those tiers over on Patreon, and the dice tray that you'll be seeing me print later will be available for free over on Thingiverse as a remix of the original creators' files. Speaking of which, if you are into 3D printing for D&D and tabletop games, consider checking out the Painted for Combat Patreon. For a couple of bucks, you can jump into the Patreon Discord server, grab my printer profiles and other tools, or at the STL tiers you can get access to not only all of the files seen here today, but also the monthly bases bundle. For March, we have the Crash Land Craters, perfect for any minis that have fallen from the sky or burst through the earth, all designed to print completely support-free on FDM printers, and where possible have been sculpted with flat top surfaces to help avoid those unsightly layer lines. So whether you want to join a like-minded community, pick up some STLs to give this a go for yourself, or just help support the channel, consider checking out the Painted for Combat Patreon. Links below. For the drawers on the right, I wanted something that wouldn't feel overly bulky, so I modelled up a tower that would sit flush up against the wooden panel, with just enough depth to comfortably store miniatures with, at the largest, a 75mm base. In the bottom, I went for a larger drawer, and then created various heights that another shorter drawer could be slotted into, which will be used to hold more minis and models. Because these drawers won't be physically attached to the screen, I did decide to add some non-slip mesh to the bottom, simply adding a generous amount of glue and smearing it around before attaching the mesh and cutting it to length. And once this is on the table, it certainly helps to stop the 3D printed plastic from sliding around every time you touch it. And of course, I also adapted the condition ring hanger so that it could slot over the top of the right panel for easy removal. That way, if I ever want to swap it out, I can. Perhaps another small shelf would be a good option to have here as well. Now, while everything we've made so far have been crucial things I have wanted for the screen, the next addition is arguably the most important: the cable box and mount for our GoPro filming setup. We have a ton of cables from a bunch of cameras that need to run through a multi-viewer and into my laptop. And because our GoPros are going to be mounted directly to the DM screen, we need somewhere to store those cables. So I designed up a pretty simple box just with a sliding cover. Of course, I made sure to leave holes for our power cables and output cables, as well as a hole in the top so that everything that needs to reach the GoPros can. And after a super long print, this slotted perfectly under the remaining section of the DM screen where we left a gap in the trim. Now I can get to screwing it in and tidying up the cables. And this time round I've even made sure to leave enough room in this box in case there are setup changes, something I neglected to do on our group's previous setup. Of course, this box isn't complete without the cover, which naturally needed a little bit of subtle branding for the players to look at while we're playing. With the cables all hidden away, it was time to mount the GoPros. These need to go smack in the middle of the screen, one facing the DM and the other at the players. And when modelling this mount, I needed to make sure that the GoPro's lenses were centrally located. And because GoPros aren't actually symmetrical, I had to offset their mounting locations ever so slightly. With this mount printed up and the supports removed, I screwed it in nice and tight to the top of the screen, making sure to keep it as level as possible. Then, after destroying a couple of official GoPro mounts for their hardware, I bolted everything into place, running the GoPro cables through the holes in both the box and the mount, then plugging everything in. And of course, a little bit of cable management goes a long way, so that my players aren't looking at an absolute bird's nest the whole time I'm running a game. And for the most part, that's our filming setup done. And if you are interested in the more technical side of how we're filming our sessions with this setup, let me know down below. I'd be more than happy to do a follow-up video either here or over on Roll for Adventure with a more behind-the-scenes look at how we film these sessions. And that just leaves us with the last big ticket item, the dice tray. I'm going to be sticking with a set of files I have used a few times now, taking a tiered dice display but adjusting it to my needs for this setup. First and foremost, this meant selecting the trays. 2 full sets, followed by rows for D10s, D8s, and D6s, the most common damage dice a DM will need en masse. On the top row of this display, however, I wanted a space for my phone, which will have the Stream Deck app open for me to change the lights and lanterns in our games room. This meant creating a blank version of this files tray, then making a small slanted slot for the phone to sit in. I also decided to slope the end of this stand to create a more natural slot for a dice tray, which I modelled up to friction fit and make this an all-in-one dice station. And with all of these designed and edited, they were over to the printer. Admittedly, I thought I would try and print all of these flat on the build plate for a nice smooth finish, and while they are mostly looking great, the slope on the D4 slot didn't take very well to this. So for these I subbed in the old prints from my old setup. After a little cleanup and some glue to hold everything together, these were ready for a coat of black primer. And while these will be getting a metallic finish, there was still some work to do before that. I picked out a nice shade of dark brown felt to match the dark wood look of the DM screen and the shelves, and I found some EVA foam, all of which will make a slightly nicer surface for rolling dice in. I used the dice tray upside down with some pressure to create an outline in the foam for me to use as a guide, and then got to cutting everything to size. This included 2 layers of foam and a single layer of felt. With everything prepped, I used a good strong glue to hold it all together, making sure to spread it all around the edges so that none of our material tries to peel away later down the line. And following suit, I used the leftover felt to create some strips of edge banding to go around the inside of the tray walls, trying to keep the seams as flush as possible. Once that glue had dried on everything, I grabbed some metallic paint and a makeup brush and dry brushed this whole stand, using long strokes to give it an almost brushed metal appearance. And even though this maybe isn't the best dry brushing job I've ever done, it still looks great all finished up. From here, it was really just a matter of finalizing the build and touching up those last few blemishes. And now, all finished up, this is my ultimate DM screen for running games of Dungeons & Dragons. Once again, all of these files will be linked down below. And if you are liking the look of this setup, why not head on over and subscribe to Roll for Adventure. This screen and the entire space we're putting together are just the start of a huge level up for that channel. There will be teasers and trailers dropping in the very near future for our next campaign, which will be filmed in this space. So if you love actual plays or D&D in general, you'll want to be there when those start dropping. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like down below, drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe for future projects and more fun with FDM printing for the tabletop. But most importantly, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.